precursor kind of thing, why joy is so important as a topic. Joy is not just, as we have been talking about again and again, sort of an emotional thing. It is one of the fruits of the Spirit: love, joy, peace, patience, kindness. So it's a very biblical thing. It is part of every Eucharistic prayer that we have. It is a right and a good and a joyful thing, always and everywhere, to give thanks to you. So even in the midst of circumstances, and I think we're going through some of the meatiest chapters of this book right now, because it is hard to find joy when we're in despair, or we're anxious or lonely or despondent or have fear. It just feels like it went out the window and all that was just lip service. Isn't that nice? When things are good, we can be joyful. But the point of this book is being able also to work on one's mind, to exercise one's mind as much as one might exercise one's body to be healthy. There's a diet of ways that we can think about things. It's not going to eliminate fear. It's not going to eliminate anxiety, but it helps us put it in perspective. And that's part of sort of where we've come from in the past couple of weeks. The other thing that we've been teaching to our confirmation class, Allison and I, is Romans 12 is a part of that. And Romans 12:2 talks about, do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. So even what Jesus, and Allison is saying this in part in the sermon, the lesson that comes up today, is about the fig tree. The gardener says to the landowner, give it some more time. That's the transformation of the mind. Don't just be real quick, off with your head, down with the tree. Just wait a minute. Think about this. Think about what could come from this and what's happening. So there are many things about transforming our mind. Even who is my neighbor, telling the parable of the Good Samaritan, that's a transformation of their mind, because they weren't thinking, and of their heart, but they weren't thinking of all the neighbors that Jesus really knew that they had, and the other way around. So the mind and heart piece that comes with this, the importance of joy in our lives as Christians, and in this wonderful, wonderful dialogue between a Buddhist, the Dalai Lama, and Archbishop Desmond Tutu, a Christian Anglican person with us, and Mr. Abrams too, Douglas Abrams, who interjects some things.
In this whole book, I can't help but remember something that came from one of my favorite books by a fellow named John O'Leary, who was burned over 99% of his body. And one of the things he says is that you can't have joy without gratitude. And gratitude is, to me, probably many things. But one of the things it does is it puts your mind in the proper perspective. You think of all the things you have to be grateful for. And that affects fear, doesn't necessarily eliminate it, but it affects all these things.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to dive into some of this, but that's just sort of my preamble before my prayer this morning. The Lord be with you.
And also with you.
Let us pray. Gracious Lord, it is a right and a good and joyful thing always and everywhere to give thanks for you, to have gratitude for all the blessings of this life. Help us to remember those each and every day. The long, long list of things that you have done for us, provided for us, offered for us, and the gift of transformation and repentance and acceptance that comes through your Son, Jesus Christ. May that also ignite our joy and help us to bear fruit in your name. Amen.
Amen.
So on the handout today, the first page is really just review. I'm not going to go through this a whole lot. It's what we've covered, Allison and I, in the first 2 weeks of this. In the middle of the page, you'll see these 8 pillars of joy, one of which, as Irv was mentioning, is gratitude, number 6. But these are the things working together that help to open up one's heart and body and soul to joy. The chapters aren't arranged this way. There is not a gratitude chapter and then a humility chapter, but all of these things are sprinkled throughout the conversation. And I try to highlight those as they come up in the things that we have talked about. But just looking on those 8 things is helpful and important. Last week, we also talked about brain and neuroscience. There'll be some of that today. And the people who have looked at the brain see that, sort of 4 categories of brain work. And some of these people in your life, they have a strong sense. They're just they can maintain a positive state. They're always seeming to be in a good mood, and that's a good thing. Another quadrant is ability to recover from a negative state. There's some resiliency there, and I can bounce back. Some people do that well, some people do that not that well. Training your mind, being aware of these things in yourself, is one of the things that can level us out and give us that perspective, gratitude being one of them. The ability to focus and not wander, which has been part of our practice, and we're going to review that, the joy practices, in just a second. And then lastly, the ability to be generous. And I love the lines that Archbishop Tutu said in this: we are hardwired for generosity. It is not something we have to make up or make ourselves do. Now, unfortunately, we can also get greedy and gluttonous and all those other kind of things that are the opposite of that kind of generosity. So we have to, these are things we can manage and monitor. And the end of what we talked about last week was Tutu's point, was the greatest joy that he has found is when we seek to do good for others. And the South African term Ubuntu, which is I am because you are, and that there is a relationship. And he talked about the point that none of us is here probably has done everything that we could to sustain our own personal lives. We've not made our own clothes. Only one of us has chickens to have eggs, but then even the eggs didn't come from a human being, right? We have cars, we have homes because of other people. We've learned a language because of other people. We are all interrelated. Now, some of us might just really feel independent, but I think that's what they're saying, is we lose perspective in that if we narrow in on ourselves and realize the interdependence that we have, the support that brings, and actually the joy that has, even with the complications it does. So last week's joy practice, and those are in the back of the book, was the one on page 312. And we're really just working on the ones that take us towards focusing the mind, settling down and being quiet. And week by week, we add to that. And so not to re-teach it, but just to ask you all, if you all had the opportunity to practice this some this week, what was that like for you?
I've been doing the breathing for a while to help with other things too.
Mhm.
And it does help calm me.
Mhm, mhm. So the breathing exercise itself is one of them.
Oh,
And you
yes.
can breathe in and out on this verse of scripture or thought. The one this was added to is number 4 in the middle of 312, your intention for the day. And that once you sort of had that focus, I intend today to be kind to strangers. And you just begin focusing on that. And you might think about the place where you would encounter a stranger. Maybe you're in a work setting that is difficult for whatever reason. Maybe it has to do with COVID, maybe it has to do with a coworker having a hard time or being a hard time. And your intention for the day is I'm going to do my best to be kind to others no matter what. And you sort of set out with, what is that? I intend to just have some humor today. One of the pillars. I'm going to laugh. I'm going to tell a joke. I'm going to learn a joke. I'm going to ask somebody about a joke. I'm going to crack a joke, all those type of things. I'm going to be humorous, all those things. And then you start in the morning with that. And then hopefully that's something that carries you past the coffee and orange juice and getting down the driveway, that you can really act it out in our lives. So if that's appealing to you, take some time. And the meditation here is not 30 seconds. It is a good, 10, 12, 15 minutes, something like that, where you really can center and try to empty stuff out of your consciousness besides this that you are working on. And that's why it's a practice. We're practicing doing this. It is not always easy to do that. And then we'll add to that our joy practice for this coming week. That's on the next page. We'll get to that in a moment. This title actually goes along with the gospel lesson too. This fig tree that is not producing in the gardener's mind is a masterpiece in the making. There is fruit to come, but there is going to be some work to do for that happening. And that's actually as we get to it at the bottom of the last part of this chapter of obstacles to joy, because yes, there is joy, and I love the way they frame this. There are obstacles. If you've been on an obstacle course, if you've seen military folks go through an obstacle course, or you've done one at summer camp and it's fun and whatever else, the point is that you do get around, that you can get around, that these are not walls that are, so wide you can't get over it, so low. It's not, they're not those kind of obstacles. And that's why there are ways that we can get around, over, under, through these. And sometimes we have to head straight in. We have to head straight in to what it is and address it. And that's the idea that they've really been building towards on mental immunity. And if you look on page 83 and page 84, I think it's going to be good for us to review this a little bit. It's at the bottom of that page 83. So this is actually what's happened. Mental immunity is what happens before you start the obstacle course. Before you start it, you're in the right frame of mind. Mental immunity is just learning to avoid the destructive emotions and to develop the positive ones. First, we must understand the mind. There are so many different states of mind, the diverse thoughts and emotions we experience on a daily basis. Some of these thoughts and emotions are harmful, even toxic, while others are healthy and healing. The former disturb our mind and cause much mental pain. The latter bring true joyfulness. And then maybe really hitting home the last lines of the next paragraph, we can create a disposition of the mind so that it will be less susceptible to negative thoughts and feelings. There's never a promise, even for Jesus when he became human and walked among us, that those things were going to absolutely positively go away forever. That's a kind of false hope or false perspective on those things. But that we are less susceptible to them if we really plan and go ahead, if we have a guiding thought for the day that helps to make us less susceptible for that kind of thing. So this is what they're defining some as the mental immunity. Adjusting one's attitude is mentioned, and also then on page 86, soothing our emotional reactivity. Now, you know yourselves better than anybody, and you can even gauge on a scale of 1 to 10, what is your emotional reactivity? And some people are just that way. They are very emotionally reactive. And some people, you wonder if they've had an emotion in the last 10 years because you never see anything happen on the surface, right? So maybe that's overmanaged emotional reactivity. That's not so healthy because we're stuffing it. And maybe the other side is if we let emotions guide us all the time, we forget that we can have some perspective and train the mind to face those emotions and not let them guide us. I remember one at a time going into my therapist's office, and it's a conglomerate of therapists. There was a bumper sticker on one of the cars that said, "Don't always believe what you feel." And it's like, oh, think about that. Yeah, someone who's scared of heights. I don't have that standing right here, but they do. Are they right or am I right? Well, no, their feelings are real. Sure. But do they need to believe that they're in absolute danger? No. Do I need to be a little more cautious standing on the edge? Yes. I mean, there's a balance of whatever those fears are that we have. And we've developed fears based on family history, our own personal experiences, all those other kind of things. And I know someone who's very scared of dogs because at a young age, she was bit by a dog. Well, that's fine. But she's encountered, hundreds of other dogs and none of them have bitten her. But that doesn't change the fact that experience, a very real experience, makes a very real feeling. And so it's about managing that. And that could be any number of things: driving, flying on a plane, all the fears that we might have. So that is part of it. And part of it, I love this example on page 87 of the dukkha and the sukha. It's ancient words from the Aryans brought through in Sanskrit. And it basically means you've been riding along on a cart and the cart had a good axle, or did it have a bad axle? Was it a bumpy ride? or was it a smooth ride? And you've been in cars where, even in our axles, sometimes they don't work so well with the suspension's off and you're bouncing around. Or we might use airlines and turbulence. Was it a turbulent flight? Was it a smooth flight? Was it a smooth day or a turbulent day? Does this experience, what you're heading into, usually make for something bumpy? We know when those are coming. The road signs can be there. So what do? We can prepare. We can get ready for that. Okay, I know this is coming, and I'm going to try to find some presence of mind, some mental immunity, so that I'm not as susceptible to that this time as I was the last time. And how does that help us then make that experience more enjoyable? I'm just never going to go on an airplane again. It's like, well, that means you're not going to see your mother or your grandchildren or where else ever again. Is it, what's it worth to do all that? What are you giving? And sometimes that's the way it is. But other times you can say, no, I can be in perspective. It was bumpy, but we made it. That was one of the examples that they gave, right? The plane flight. And they turned around because the engine was about to fall off. And he was stomping his feet. Oh, I had to go to the zoo that day, and it wasn't that too bad. But then he realized, like, oh, a day at the zoo is better than being at the bottom of the ocean. So let's be happy about what. And so that's the way his mental immunity toward his own anger and his own frustration at circumstances that were beyond his control.
Seems to me a way to get mental immunity is to remember that old song, accentuate the positive, eliminate the negative.
That is part of it. That's part. But in reality, we can't eliminate the negative.
No.
But we can put it in perspective. And I think that's where we're getting to on this. And again, helping us to then level and enjoy the things that are enjoyable. That's part of what gratitude does. Everything's going, oh, it's a rainy day. We had planned to be here for a vacation. We were going to hike. We were going to boat. We were going to fish. We were going to play golf. And now it's raining. Well, we're still here together. So it's a way of saying, okay, I can take my frustration, balance that out, and accentuate the positive, and move on in those type of ways. So, and again, the last part of this section of being a masterpiece in the making comes from Tutu on page 92. It is similar how we learn to be a parent, the Archbishop says. You learn how to react to a child who is really frustrating you. You are better with your third child than you are with your first child. And so I would say to everyone, you are made for perfection, but you are not yet perfect. You are a masterpiece in the making. That's why these are practices of joy. Just like people practice medicine or practice religion, we're always practicing. Golf, you're always practicing. And all these things, you're always never going to get it right. And so those of us who might be perfectionists always have to temper that sense too, that I can get, a perfect 10 on my vaulting routine every time. No, you can't. But the pursuit of that is a wonderful thing that comes from it. Does anybody want to share the thoughts, circumstance that comes to mind when we read this? Allison?
Well, I think it's about, what I was thinking about this morning is that it's about looking at reality and not denying it. So I think when you say eliminate the negative, like for a long time, I used to just deny that it happened.
Right.
That is not the way to live life, right? So it's about looking at reality and then being able to have perspective.
Right.
To have someplace, maybe not slot it, but someplace where it lives in the balance, if that's true, between whatever that is. So it's not just saying that didn't happen, it doesn't exist. I didn't feel bad. I wasn't hurt. And, it doesn't say that. That's never in reading the Book of Joy that I heard that. Right? So that was really That's what struck me this week in this reading. That it's not about denying something.
Right.
Because that's a tool I learned really early on. Don't see it. It didn't happen. It doesn't exist.
Right.
But that's not the same.
Right.
Well, I think one thing that goes along with kind of what she's saying is that I learned from Allison is acknowledgement of things. And when she taught us the thing about breathing in, good thoughts in God and breathing out the evil thoughts,
There's so many things go across my mind. It shouldn't go across my mind, but for so long you just feel like, well, they're just gonna go, can't get rid of them. But at least by breathing in and breathing them out, which you need to do doing anything, you're acknowledging that they're there, but you're not for
Right.
them. Yeah.
And I'm not going to let them have ultimate control over me.
Don't hang my coat up.
That's right. There are things that I can do to manage with God's help, right? And the help of these practices, which are, from God.
Martin Luther used to say, you can't keep the birds from doing the nest in your hair, but you can keep them from settling there and laying eggs.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Some of us don't even have that problem.
Well, and it's important to remember from what Allison said when you're saying, the way of the cross. There's a prayer that says about Jesus went not to joy, but first suffered pain. Actually using the word joy in that. And that's the way of the cross to be the way of peace. So there is suffering. And the suffering that he did commiserating with people who had lost a brother, right? Mary and Martha, losing Lazarus, commiserating with those who are blind or about to be stoned for adultery, or commiserating with versus then being on the receiving end of spitting and harassment and all those things. And Paul and a lot of Christians to some extent, those things are just going to be there. But how do they address those difficulties in the face of apartheid, in the face of exile, in the face of a war, in the face of immigration issues, in the face of COVID, in the face of all these things that are despair and loneliness and anger and frustration. And so that's where I really felt the book is constructed well to warm us up, to dig into those very real things. Again, touching on Allison's sermon, it's not that these things aren't going to happen or they're happening to good people as punishment or bad people as punishment. This is life. This is life. To live is to experience a variety of these things. And how do we go through life? And as it says in this next chapter, fear, stress, and anxiety, changing something from a threat in our minds to a challenge. Threat anxiety versus challenge anxiety. Even reframing the way that is we look at it. Because, again, back to our brains, we've got this limbic system, this reptilian brain, which is fight, flight, or freeze. And all creatures have that. And to survive, we needed to either know whether to freeze, they won't see me, fight back to save my life, or run as fast as I can in the other direction. And that's why species survive and grow and evolve and all those other kind of things. Thanks be to God, our species then developed more of a brain that can process those emotions and make challenges out of it and make decisions based on those and have them not just be instant reactivity. And some of the reactivity is also part of training the mind. Yeah, Nancy?
What about people
Right. Yeah, I don't think I do have an answer on that, except that's part of what they are dealt with. And it may be even like with somebody with Down syndrome, oftentimes we experience a whole lot more joy in those individuals than we do in regular people. And what is it going on with their brain that lets them just celebrate and be joyful and playful and maybe not be so self-conscious and maybe not, but there are ups and downs in all of us. But hopefully with people with chemical imbalances and mental illness, either through therapy or medication or adjustments, can get to a place where they too can help train themselves a little bit, not to get anxious about this, that, or the other, or fearful as much. Again, it's managing those things. It's not eliminating them. And that's
I
it.
think that's true, even people that suffer from oppressive violence. Find it, that is more challenging. Absolutely.
Mhm.
Where is the joy? Because that is the, presenting factor of depression. There is no joy.
Mhm.
And so how can we Sometimes that comes with medication, or whatever. Hopefully, sometimes the church, liturgy,
Sure,
experience of
Sure.
community
right.
can also be helpful. But yeah, that's a real challenge. It's absolutely true.
And I think the experience of community is one of the things they come back to again and again and again. If you're all alone experiencing these things, your fear, your anxiety can go up. If you're in a group, then you have the ability to lean on each other, to problem solve together, to calm each other down, or one person, all those other kind of things. So that, and just like coming into a church the first time, what was it like for you to come to Good Shepherd the first time? I don't know anybody. I do know somebody. I'm a little bit nervous. How's this going to be? Well, then what was it like for you to come in today? Oh, this is my home. I feel comfortable. I know these people. I know these, I know the layout. It's just, I mean, sometimes time itself does some of that, but that's what also the work of love does, is we are shaped into this group where we do feel comfortable. For any church or any group, we don't want to get so comfortable then that we can't welcome somebody else, right? And so, and I'm not saying that we don't do that here, or if we do, we're doing it very infrequently. But that's also an important part of community and helping others on their journey. Sharon?
Well, I feel like reframing is a lot of what they're talking about here. And, you know, if we even reframe our own vocabulary sometimes, you know, if I have whatever, a daughter's wedding coming up in 3 months, and okay, my expectation, and Webster says that means looking forward to it's likely or certain to happen.
Mm-hmm.
My expectation is that I can lose 20 pounds by then. Okay, and buy, you know, all of the right tapes and join the club, and, you know, I'm working out, and I only lose 14, I fail.
Right.
If my goal is, you know, if I set a positive goal and I go forward with the things I know best to do, I've done pretty well.
That's right.
I hadn't lost 14 pounds in the last 10 years. That's
Mhm,
awesome.
mhm.
You know, so just by reframing sometimes our thought process, we can turn that around.
That's right. Or even with that example, well, I didn't lose all of it, but I still have a few more weeks to lose that 6. 20 can still be my goal, even if I didn't hit it in the time of one. I mean, it's all different ways, but exactly right.
I think we get afraid to turn around. I mean, as I look at this room from my perspective right now, there are no doors on it. I can't get out of here.
Mhm, right.
And if that's affecting my breathing, you know, I look at, okay, I'm looking at Laura, she's turned that way right now. Laura Langford, and she sees a door over here, and 3 sets of doors over here. There's something that I can change in my point of view if I'll just be brave enough to turn.
Right. Right. And that's where, in what the example, the reptilian brain, fight, flight, or freeze, sometimes we freeze too much. We get so frozen that we can't see to turn our head or to think about something else. We're just sort of stuck. It's another word for all that. Or we just start running when that was actually, you know, the deer is running. I've seen it where deers are running along and it actually runs in front of the car. It's like, no. You just stayed, you were fine where you were. If you just stayed right there, you would have been fine. So again, it's the decisions that we as human beings have the same type of thing to deal with. So heading into the next sort of subsection, you're a masterpiece in the making is sort of the section hiding, days 2 and 3, the obstacles to joy. But looking at this next one, fear, stress, and anxiety. Anybody ever experienced fear or stress or anxiety? Okay, human condition, right? This is not something that is, oh, I feel so lucky in there. Then you have not been living if you have been to do that. So actually flipping to page 95 and talking about at that sort of the top of that section, as the Archbishop has said, it is when natural fear gets exaggerated that we experience stress, worry, and anxiety. And so when those levels go up, and then we become overwhelmed. And the other point is made on the bottom of 94, that courage, as I say in my notes, is not the absence of fear, It's the ability to act despite of it.
Ralph has a sign.
Mhm.
There, some of it. Life is not about waiting for the storm to pass. It's about learning to dance in the rain.
Right, yeah.
That's good.
And that's a part of the courage, right? It's just to act despite the fear to flee, the fear to fight, the fear to freeze, whatever that is, we can still act. It's getting past that part of our brain to do it. Think about even folks like Zelensky right now, President Zelensky, how courageous he is being. When people are saying, get out of the country, go in exile, protect yourself, protect your own skin, what does he do? No, he gets on, he is what, encouraging a nation, really the world, to think, we can do this. Yeah, we got Big Daddy up here trying to come in and do all this other kind of stuff, but that kind of courage. And that's found every day. That's found with somebody walking into a classroom, whether it's a student or a child, and they're scared of a school situation or a bully or whatever else it is. It's really being able to manage all that. And that it does take some training of the mind to do that. For some people, the fear is public speaking, something fairly innocent, but some people don't have that fear, some people do. But how do we then act despite of the fears we have? And that takes mindfulness and some of this mental immunity. And on page 97, I love this, this idea of giving something space. Sometimes we get angry or hot-headed, we just need some time to cool down. My mother would say that to me as a child: go into your room, get your pillow for 5 minutes, then rest, and then come back out and we'll talk. Give yourself some space to process what's going on. I didn't have the words or the whatever else. What does a young boy need to do that? The same type of thing in soccer, in a weird way. If you've seen, 5-year-olds playing soccer, everybody, the field is huge, but the whole group is right in here, and there's no space. There's absolutely no space to pass the ball, to run, or whatever else. And so how you get soccer players to advance is spread out. Run, pass the ball over here to this space. Or even when you're passing the ball, throwing the ball, whatever else, you're passing to where the receiver, football receiver, is going to be, or where the soccer players, you're passing into space that way. And so creating space is what this morning practice is doing. You're creating the space. You're stopping to say, wait a minute. One of the things that Allison and I have both been a part of, at least I think you have, Allison Credo, is again sort of about helping clergy in their daily life with things. And they use the example of margins. When you have a book like this, there are margins. There's a little bit of space there. Well, think if the words went all the way to the end, and there's really no space for notes, no space for the eye. You even get overwhelmed looking at the page because it's so crazy. So how do we live life that has margins, that we create that space? Some people have learned, and I should have learned this, if the meeting starts at 5 o'clock and you're there at 4:55, you're late. You be there 10 minutes early, because that creates space for you to settle down, for you to say hi, for you to walk into a room and there's something different than you're expecting it to be, to adapt to it and not be frustrated. You see me frustrated with that machine in there. Or some of the time it is because I've been walking in late, or we're walking in late to church. We forget the margins that we need to make things happen. And so that's part of that creating of space that I really like what he says here. Symptoms of last full paragraph in that section on 97. Symptoms of chronic stress are feelings of fragmentation and of chasing after time, of not being able to be present. What we are looking for is a settled, joyful state of being, and we need to give that state space. Even reading this book is creating some of that space. Being in this class is creating some of that space. Jesus going off by himself to pray is creating the space. And so all that is a very important part of doing it. And then at the bottom of 97, what I mentioned earlier, when we turn a threat into a challenge. Anybody want to try to give an example of a threat being turned into a challenge?
The barn will never make $150,000.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, that's right. Mhm.
Yeah, when my husband was accepted in Georgia Tech, someone made a comment, and you'll never graduate from Georgia Tech, you're not smart enough. Oh, no.
Yeah.
Mhm.
He graduated from Georgia Tech.
Mhm.
That was a challenge. That was a big kind of
Yeah,
challenge.
yeah. And the perspective on that statement, actually, maybe that even motivated him more to be told that. I'm going to prove this person wrong. I'm going to take this challenge on. Am I scared of, quantum physics? You better believe I'm scared of quantum physics, but I got to take that class. Or those who want to be a doctor, you got to take organic chemistry. You may hear everything about that but you're going to have to take it and you're going to have to pass it. And all those things that come, that's the cute girl over there. That's the cute guy over there. Oh, I'm too shy to even ask him to dance. I'm not going to do that because I'm scared. They'd reject me, whatever else. Or it's like, well, maybe they will, maybe they won't, but I'm going to go up and say hi. And maybe they turn out to be a nice person and a nice friend or a spouse or who knows what. But it's just the threat, the anxiety that we feel in a social situation, academic situation, social situation is I wouldn't say like a threat to your life, but a threat to your stability. And how do I, get out of the box and see what's on the other side?
Yeah, I think for me, it's always, it's probably more likely to be interpersonal
Mhm.
rather than systemic. So what are people going to think of me?
Mhm.
Because it's probably motivating that,
Right.
and so it's been thinking this week about how to let go of outcomes. So that helps me reframe
Yes.
that,
Mhm.
where they like, what do I need to say?
Mhm.
What is God asking me to say? Rather than being driven by fear or not having someone think ill of me or question my something, whatever that is,
Mhm.
credentials, whatever
Right,
it is.
right.
Yeah.
The one scientific piece in all this that I found interesting on page 98, and I hadn't even heard these words before, telomeres.
Yeah.
It's part of our DNA. And it's just like something that has a frayed edge after a while, something that gets worn out on a fabric and or the elbows get worn down on a sweater. Well, that's that part of a DNA. And they're saying stress and anxiety wear down the telomeres, which are receptive. And that's not a nerve, that's not a cell, that's the actual DNA. And when that's happening, that leads to aging and all these other, it's not that we're not going to age, but that some people have aged faster, mentally, physically, whatever else, because of stress and anxiety. You see that we have the phrase, right? I can see it in your face that something's going on. The wrinkles started coming at age 22 or whatever else. And because they're always just so, stressed out that way. But how then that affects the body itself. Then with some mindfulness, how we're able to maybe protect those telomeres with some of these mindful practices that help us to age well. And that's part of it. It's not just getting to that number 90, age 90 or 95, whatever. We also want to have some quality of life at that age, right?
Sure.
I mean, pastorally, yeah, right, yeah, right. Here's a good example, right? And that's actually, pastoral situations with people, they're deciding between quality and quantity of life sometimes. And those are difficult decisions, but what can we do to set our mind and bodies up for health long term? So even all of these are about health, not just about joy, but even extending that joy to year 88, 89, or 90, whatever else it is. So one of the last phrases on page 100 before our joy practices, what the Dalai Lama and I are offering is a way of handling your words. So these joy practices are a way of handling the worry. And let's look at the one on page 315, which is your assignment for the week. And at the top of that page, 315, you see the words analytic meditation. So this is deep thinking on a subject. You're analyzing a situation in your life in the same type of meditative state that you've been in, where you may have just been focusing on your breathing. You add a little task to that by saying, okay, what is my thought for the day? What's my focus for the day going to be? And this one, you add another either branch or layer to that by analyzing something in your life. So for example, on page 317, it talks about a fear and how one might analyze fear at the bottom of the page. How can I face this fear directly? Can you think of the worst thing that would happen to you if your fear comes true of going to Georgia Tech? Can you or your loved one survive what might happen? Yes. If I fail out of Georgia Tech, if that person says no to me at the dance, I will survive. Could it actually be beneficial to you or your loved ones? Yes, it could. The failure or the success. Because if the wrong person says no to me at the dance, the next person might be the right person. And if that person had said yes, I never would have met that person. So again, perspective on how all that goes. How might this allow you or them to grow and deepen as a person? So it's taking that fear, giving it space, and opening it up to these varieties of analytical questions. So you'll see it, and again, not to go through it totally, but on 318, anger, and all the questions one might ask themselves about a time of anger. And 318 at the bottom, sadness. What are all the questions I can ask myself? So it's facing the sadness, like Allison is saying, it doesn't go away, but I'm going to take a look at my sadness. Why am I sad about my health, my parents, my children, my job, my whatever else it is? Why am I sad? And let me just, in this meditative time, giving it space, let me think about it. And hopefully that's going to open up something for me. And it might even lead to a conversation with somebody else, that a close friend, hey, I was thinking about this, and that conversation even opens up more that comes to it and helps you address whatever the fear or the anger or the sadness is. So again, it's getting around that obstacle. If it's just hard, fast, can't get around it, can't get over the fear, whatever else can't. No, we're going to shorten the wall. We're going to create a door. We're going to find the rope, whatever it is, to help us get over that piece. And part of it is doing it together. Any other thoughts or questions about this today? So I encourage you, what I love about this too, these chapters are fairly short. They can be read and reread. If you hadn't heard me say it, listening to this on Audible or one of those things is also a helpful way to look at it and read it. I've listened to it first, and then I go back and read it. And that helps me to sort of know where they're going and that kind of thing. So I encourage you, and it's also giving me some space, both those opportunities to take it in again. I've really liked this book so much more than I thought I would, and I hope you're finding it rewarding in some great ways too. Next week, Allison will be teaching on pages 1 through 123, frustration and anger, sadness and grief, and despair, other regular parts of human life. And if you need extra reading, read Job or a gospel.